All right, so for the rest of the release schedule of the first party titles noted in the direct, I'll be spearheading it on my own. And next on the schedule is Pokemon Legends Z to A on October 16th. And before getting into discussion about Z and A proper, I just wanted to give a brief history of mine with Pokemon the franchise because it's a very concise one in that as a kid, I grew up in the 90s and I was basically right there. And I was of the right demographic, right at the center of the Pokemon craze. So like I was the target audience and they got me. I was like a lot of kids at the time really big into Pokemon. I was into the anime, I was into the card game, and I dabbled in the games. I would say that was definitely of the three pillars of the Pokemon experience. The games were my least favorite element of them. And it wasn't for lack of effort either. I got Pokemon Yellow, and I think it might have been my first turn-based RPG, and it did not it did not play well with me. I lost to Brock or whoever the first gym leader was in that game, or something happened. Like I don't even know if I got to the gym leader. It's been so long. But I didn't have any other Pokemon besides Pikachu. Pikachu fainted, and I was like, I guess that's game over. And I just stopped playing. So yeah, that was basically my experience with the Pokemon game series for the longest time until Pokemon X and Y. So I forget the exact timeline for the 3DS and the Wii and the Wii U and all that. They all mix and sort of are part of this specific period in my life where I think I was in university at the time or whatever, and I was just not really playing games as much. I didn't have as much time, and when I would just play. I think my first PlayStation console I owned was the one I got during that time, which is the PS3, and I was just playing Call of Duty. I would just chill out and just run around and do a lot of team deathmatch time stuff. Just throw away really easy gaming during that period. It wasn't too much. I really was in on my studies and stuff. But yeah, around that time later, towards the final years and afterwards, I finally started getting back into Nintendo gaming. And I got a 3DS and a Wii. I think that's how I learned about the Wii U actually, was I got a text from one of my cousins that there was a Smash game out or gonna be out, and they had just announced Mega Man was gonna be in it. And so I watched the trailer, the reveal trailer for Mega Man in class, learning about Smash, the newest Smash game at that moment. And so that kind of brought me back in. Smash Brothers brought me back into Nintendo gaming, and I got a 3DS, and I was like, you know what? I hadn't messed with Pokemon at all up until that point for years. So I got Pokemon X and Y. I got X, I think. No, I got Y, the one with the red bird. And I did give it a good shake. Like I played it quite a bit. I don't know exactly which gym leader I stopped at, but basically I was catching Pokemon, I was playing it, but I was really just like relying on Chespin and going as far as I could with Chespin, and he was really just doing it all. Like he was a one-man army up until one of the bosses. I think it was like in a roller skate rink or something, or some kind of like battle network looking place. People were skating around, and the gym leader had like 3 or 4 Pokemon, and Chespin couldn't take them all out and fainted. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm done. I'm just not built for turn-based RPGs. I kind of knew that already going into it, but I was like, it's Pokemon. It's been a long time. Maybe I am about this stuff now. And it turns out, to a certain degree, yeah, I can roll with it, but it's one of my least favorite video game genres for sure. And that's kind of my last Pokemon experience up until Pokemon Legends Arceus. And even then, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is the one. And I jumped into it, launch day and stuff. I got it. I borrowed it from a family member. So like, it was just like, okay, I got my hands on this. it was very Breath of the Wild coded. Like the reveal trailer, if you haven't seen it in a while, it was a game that came out after Breath of the Wild, and you can tell it was very influenced by Breath of the Wild, and probably wanted to be as much that as possible within bounds. And I think they did a lot good with it. Like, unfortunately, they didn't pull off a Breath of the Wild in that it was a perfect, fully realized open world Pokemon experience from the jump. At the end of it definitely, my feeling about it was like, it's a good proof of concept. Like, they did a lot of good stuff here. They've made interesting changes, and their approach to it was really sound. This was nothing like X and Y in the previous games I had played. It did have the turn-based battling still, but even then, you could like circumvent battles entirely and just catch Pokemon if they were low level enough or something. It's been a few years. Like I just remember a lot of the things that they did in there being really good, and performance-wise, it was good too. But yeah, that's kind of I don't go to give a full review of Arceus, but basically I came away from that being pleasantly surprised. I really, really like Arceus. I love the art style too, although even then it can't like make up for the graphical shortcomings. Like that is a game that still, even after finishing it and playing it fully, it was like, I could see this looking better. Like this isn't the end stage like with Breath of the Wild where I'm like, you're perfect. They basically, that analogy was they came out and were like, we're going to try an open world, open air Zelda game in 3D. And they killed it on the first try. Pokemon Legends Arceus, I feel like, did a lot right, but it didn't exactly, it's not the end all be all. They could improve from there. And that kind of leads into Pokemon Legends Z to A, where it looks like a step forward, or at least a step in a different direction in terms of the combat, but in terms of the open world aspect of it, that's the element that I am definitely most disappointed in, and was disappointed in from the start when they revealed it, because even from the jump they kind of just showed the city, even before when it was just this CG rendering. And I was worried then, like, okay, we're seeing a city, but is that like the starting area? And then from there you leave the city and you explore a big open world? And it turns out, no, that's not the case, at least at launch. Who knows? Maybe there's like, a big surprise in there where like 2/3 of the way through, you get to go to another area or outside the gates for a decent distance. Who knows? Maybe they snuck in a cool surprise like that. But given the quick turnaround of these games, like Arceus is only, 2 years old now from launch of this game? That's not a lot of time to, make a Breath of the Wild size game. And that's kind of going to go into the main point with this one and why I'm not as excited for it at this point as I thought I would be, days before launch. I thought, I'm a little tepid about it at first when they first announced it like a year ago or whatever, earlier this year. But maybe they'll show some cool stuff and win me over. That hasn't happened. And I think it's because after playing Pokemon Legends and seeing that game for what it was, I was like, you are good for what you are, and you did what you did really well. And I'm actually a fan of open world games that go for open zone design, because there's this game that did that, Pokemon Legends Arceus, where you had these big areas, but it's not one complete area like Hyrule, for example. You are going to you're loading into one place, and then you leave that place, and then you load into another zone, and it's called this open zone style. And Sonic Frontiers did the same thing too, and I love that game. Like, that would have been my game of 2023 had it not been for Tears of the Kingdom. Like, you just lost to, I don't know, my second favorite game of all time. You didn't there's only so much you can do, Sonic. But otherwise, Frontiers is phenomenal, and that game also utilizes an open zone design. So I figured, after getting their feet wet and figuring out how to do a game of this scope with Arceus, that they would then take that next step and go all the way and make the game that honestly I am waiting for the most, because I'm not a big Pokemon fan, again, as I've just established. Only really played 2 games in the series, barely played the first one. And so I'm not here for just Pokemon no matter what. There is one experience that Pokemon can offer as a game experience that would bring me in fully and have me hyped as hell. And that would, of course, be just a full-blown open world Pokemon. Not open zone. I want to see them try something completely different and really go that extra step and use what they learned in Arceus to make the fully open world, open air, maybe even Pokemon game. And I think maybe Scarlet and Violet is that. But again, that one is really like, I haven't played it, to be fair, but all I've heard and seen is that that game is poorly made. Like, that is not the end all be all again of that vision. And I'm really hoping one day that happens in my lifetime where we do get it. We do get that Unreal Engine Pokemon game. You know, like, I know we joke about it and stuff, but there is a reason why people opine for the Unreal Engine version of an experience, because there is some impressiveness with what Unreal Engine can offer in terms of graphics. Now, does that mean that's the superior art style and every game should have the Unreal Engine art style? Of course not. Breath of the Wild is proof of that. But yeah, I was hoping that the sequel to Arceus, whenever that would come out, like, it didn't need to be now, like 2.5, 3 years later, because that seemed unrealistic. But whenever that came around, they would blow us out of the water, and it would be that full-blown, like, open environment out in the wild, not in a city, which again was a little depressing too, because I had been to this city before in X and Y. Like, that's the one Pokemon game I played, so I'm like, I remember this city. It looked like a city, you know, and it wasn't a very impressive or all that interesting city either. And in Arceus or Zeta A, it still doesn't look all that interesting in terms of city design. In terms of city design, I mean, the gold standard, I don't know. There's a ton of cities in games, and I haven't played them all. God, definitely haven't. But, like, Night City is impressive and interesting and, like, takes forever to explore and is infinitely fun to explore because of the setting and the time period and all the interesting things going around and the socioeconomic conditions and all that stuff about that fantasy experience, that alternate reality that they present. X and Y, of course, obviously they have Pokemon. Like, does your city have Pokemon walking around in it? But at the same time, I don't know if they're even going to go as far as, like, what Detective Pikachu did, and sort of how you can see the Pokemon and how they embed into a civilized and artificial human society, right? Like, this isn't nature. This is a human city designed for human needs. So how do Pokemon fit into that? I think maybe even at the end of it, Detective Pikachu would stand as a better representation of Pokemon living in a city and what that actually would look like, because you could talk to the Pokemon. Like, you play as Pikachu, Detective Pikachu, and when you talk to Pokemon, they don't just say their names. They're, like, talking like normal, you know? So I didn't play the full game of that, so I don't count that as having been a full Pokemon experience I've experienced. But what little I did play, I liked a lot. Not for $50. I was like, I'm not ready to pay $50 for this. But I did like what angle of the Pokemon world they were presenting with that. And even that, I don't think is going to be explored to that degree in Legend Zeta A. And hopefully I'm wrong. Maybe you do get a Pokemon or trend, you know, anything could happen. That's a cool thing. Anything could happen. Maybe you play as a Pokemon and you go around and you get to interact with Pokemon directly and talk to them, like, with words and stuff, and learn how they're feeling about living in the city and what that's like for them, and go on interesting side quests in that way. But I'm not holding my breath for that. And overall, even if that's a thing, it's still far from the experience I was hoping the sequel to Legends Arceus would be, which again would be a massive open world experience. Like, honestly, one of the recent trailers confirmed that the city is just the starting area, and then from there you can branch out and explore a greater natural open world with other towns to go to and tons of natural environment in between, that would have been great. And maybe that's what Scarlet and Violet is. From what all I know about it is that it is open world like that. It's just not a very impressive one in terms of presentation. But maybe in terms of experience, it's close to that. And maybe that's now on Switch too with the performance improvements. That's the time to jump in and check it out. And maybe I'll even prefer that over Arceus Zeta A. But yeah, that's definitely the reason why I'm not going to be there for day one for Zeta A. Hopefully reviews are glowing and it turns out to be a surprise in terms of how much fun it is and how much of a step up it is from Arceus. But from the outside looking in now pre-launch, it is disappointing. It is disappointing that we are going from multiple zones, these big zones from different like biomes and weather conditions, to this one city, where we've got air conditioning. Like it's a perfectly civilized and again, like artificial experience compared to the harsh natural environment that was so much fun to interact with. Because you were straight up fighting Pokemon sometimes or trying to run away for for your life. So I just found Arceus just so good and so refreshing, and it did what it did and was trying to do really well. Far from perfect. There are a lot of little nitpicks and things I would change in a sequel, but yeah, they really zigged here with Zeta A. I didn't expect them to go in this direction with the next one. So yeah, maybe it's them again using this as a sort of test bed for this new combat system. So they kind of wanted to, the turnaround is crazy. Like they're putting out another open world game 2 years and change after the last one. That's asking a lot from a team. If it's the same team as Arceus and it's everybody that was just like on that shifting over to this one and doing this from scratch, yeah, I could see why it's a little bit pared down in terms of scope and in the open world aspect of it, because they wanted to spend most of their time working out all the kinks and elements of this new combat system that they're implementing. So then from this game, let's say it doesn't have that massive surprise and there is another environment or biome to explore outside of Lumiose. Maybe they take what they learned from Arceus and that open zone design and those big environments that they had to explore and the combat system from Legend Zeta A, and they use those lessons and combine them to make Pokemon Legends 3 into the open air Pokemon game that I think they want to make, as evidenced by Arceus and Scarlet and Violet, into the game that I want from them and what I think they want too. So yeah, that kind of sums up everything about Pokemon Legends Zeta A for me. Hopefully it reviews well. In terms of performance though, it looks rock solid, at least the Switch 2 version, because clearly they started with the Switch as a foundation, and with that Switch 2 hardware you can only go up from there. So I don't really have high hopes for the Switch 1 version, but at the same time, Legends Arceus, I didn't have any issues with its performance. I don't even remember if it was 30 or 60, and honestly it didn't matter. I finished that game. I got as far, I got 99% of the way. The last Pokemon that you had to get, I didn't want to go through the whole rigmarole to get to the final secret boss. But yeah, I played the whole thing and had a great time. Performance-wise, didn't experience any bugs or glitches or anything. And again, other than sort of the graphical fidelity being a little underwhelming, even at the time, it was obvious. The art style, I loved. I loved it. So honestly, I think this Legends team, they kind of have the 3D thing down better than the mainline series team that made Scarlet and Violet and Sword and Shield and stuff. So I kind of actually expect this one to play pretty well on Switch as well. Definitely not as well as on Switch 2, obviously, but I don't expect it to be an S show like Scarlet and Violet was at launch. And on that same day, Pokemon Legends Zeta A, the DLC for it, which was announced and discussed in that same direct, the first part of it drops as well. So I think you can just go ahead and purchase the whole thing. I don't know if you even can buy the first part of it exclusively on its own. But the whole thing together, I think it's just the season pass or whatever. It's just this expansion. You buy it all now and you don't get it all now. That's the interesting thing. I wonder how many people are just going to go ahead and pay for that right away, even though all you get with this first half of it is like some cosmetics, I think, like 2 outfits. I really, we vote with our wallets, and it'll be interesting to see how people really feel about this DLC once we get some hard numbers about how well it has sold so far during this launch period, when we don't know what the actual meat and potatoes of it is gonna be. I mean, I don't know how people feel about the DLC for Scarlet and Violet. This will be the first time the Legends franchise has gotten DLC. Arceus didn't get any, and then honestly, while I was playing it, I didn't feel like it needed any either. Like, it's a complete experience from start to finish, which may end up being a rarity going forward, even with Nintendo, unfortunately. But yeah, basically when it comes to DLC, season passes and expansions, Nintendo, as usual, was late to the party. Other people, other studios and stuff were in on this DLC and all these other things years ago, but of course Nintendo gets the memo a little late, but now they've gotten it. And here we are getting DLC announced once more before the game itself that we're getting DLC for has even launched. And that's not new. That happened with Breath of the Wild. But given the price of things now and how high they are, and the fact that we're paying full price for this game, we paid full price for Breath of the Wild as well, but now it's $70. And of course, there's been the controversy around Pokemon overall in the games from the Switch 1 generation because of their performance and presentational values and how they look. People are feeling a little less, I think, charitable about something like this when the experiences that they're paying for at launch already feel underwhelming in certain respects and a little unsatisfying. And yeah, when they go pay premium, pay full AAA launch game pricing for this title with the visuals and the performance that you get with that, only to expect paid DLC afterwards, it's rubbing people the wrong way, especially now with games from Nintendo costing $70 on Switch 2. I think people are expecting a little more from the initial $70 purchase. And I think it's maybe a little bit naive to expect free expansions and updates, even though we're now paying a little higher premium for titles at launch. But at the same time, I don't disagree with the notion that, I felt like that with, and Scuffy felt like that with Donkey Kong too, as he discussed. He's like, I don't know if the DLC as it is was worth it, or DK even. The base game was worth it at 70, but together, Donkey Kong with the DLC, the Emerald Rush and DK Island stuff, that to him seemed like a perfectly fine $70 value. And hopefully this isn't an instance where the game feels by the end of it incomplete or lacking content, and this DLC will be the thing that fleshes it out fully and completes the experience. Because then at that point, it's proof that they literally, either they released it early because they wanted to hit a specific date in order to be in line with all the other merchandise launches and anime launch and stuff like that, because all that stuff is synchronized. Like the new season of the anime, I'm pretty sure is going to be related to the stuff in this game or have some relation to it. So all these things had to come out at relatively the same time. So if they released it early, even though development wasn't finished, and thus are going to keep working on it after the fact, and then release the final act or whatever of the game as paid content, that sucks. But if they already had planned beforehand to do that and literally held back content so that they could squeeze out more after the fact, and we're robbing you of a full complete experience on disc, on cart from the jump, that's not good either. So I think that's kind of where people are at on this one, where most people really had a negative response to it, was because they're worried that, oh, so they just cut content that they intended to put from the jump in this game so that they could charge us for it later. And it's not just this thing like, oh, like Breath of the Wild's DLC, like I think, or Tears of the Kingdom, I mean, like they were saying like some of the stuff, like a lot of the stuff that we see in Tears of the Kingdom was part of the brainstorming for Breath of the Wild's DLC or another DLC that they wanted to put for it, but it spiraled out of control and just kept snowballing and eventually snowballed into a whole new game, right? Like that's kind of what you want DLC to be, where it's like, all right, the base game is the full experience. Like Arceus Legends Arceus. You play that game from start to finish, you feel like you played a full game and you bought a full game at launch and you feel good about it. If they had released DLC for that, cool. More the merrier, right? For people who want it. Me and Scuff already discussed sort of where we stand on certain types of DLC and the types that we like. For this game, I'm not getting it at launch. This is not the kind of game I would get DLC for, no matter what it is, unless it's a full-blown like second campaign or something. But yeah, we really don't know anything about the meat and potatoes of the Pokemon Z to A DLC. But if you do decide to just go all in at launch and buy the base game and the DLC ahead of time, you're looking at 100 bones for the Switch 2 edition, unless you get some kind of store discount or something, and the DLC at $30, and that's all on October 16th. So, I could do that. I could just add up the tally for all the prices of the things that they release in a given month to see how much it costs to be a true diehard Nintendo fan each month of the year and average it out. For this one, it would be $70 for that, plus $70 for Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 if you get the full complete physical collection. That's $140. So yeah, and then 40, 50, 60, 70 with the DLC. And then on the 28th, this is just merchandise and apparently something that was announced beforehand. Metroid Prime 1 through 3, a visual retrospective. Apparently this has been a thing for a while, but it just never got a release date. Hopefully they weren't taking pre-orders back when they announced it, because from what I've heard, what little I've heard, it's been like a year or something since we've heard anything about this, since it was announced. I didn't know. This is the first I had seen of it in the Direct. And yeah, that looks like a must-have. I just finished Metroid Prime 2, and I'm going through Metroid Prime 3, and ooh boy, it's not just like, oh yeah, this is great, I remember. Like, I feel very differently about these Prime games than I did before I replayed them. And I want to go into that separately at another time. Maybe during the Metroid Prime 4 segment of this discussion. But yeah, that's the month of October. As of this posting, when this goes out, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 will have come out. And Mario or Pokemon Legends Z to A will be only a few days away from launch. And then Metroid Prime 3 at the end of the month, a visual retrospective. I don't know if it's an amalgamation of like previous strategy guides and art books and stuff like that they've released. But at the very least, it'll be nice to have them all in one place if it is. Hopefully they put some new unseen content in there. But yeah, that's definitely something I need to have for sure.